Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the third episode of Rethinking EDU. This is our first time with 5 people on the same podcast, and so we had a little bit of audio quality issues in the middle of the episode. You might hear people's voices sound a little wonky, but don't worry, I think our message still rings true. Teacher self care is so important in the time of COVID-19. We hope you love this episode, our guest Fran Warren, and we hope that you'll continue to come back and listen to Rethinking EDU. Check back soon for episode 4 in our next series about networks. Thanks. Hey everyone, this is Mike Dunn, and welcome to episode 3 of Rethinking EDU. We really appreciate you joining us for this episode. We've got a really fun and I think interesting topic this evening that we're going to talk about. This episode is the third of our first series, which is all about teaching during the pandemic that is being caused by the coronavirus. And so all of us teachers here, there's 5 of us here tonight, we are all, sequestered at home and trying to continue quote unquote school as usual, I guess, right? From our houses. I just want to introduce everybody who's joining us this evening. So I'm here with my co-hosts, Matt, Julie, and Janine. Janine, you want to say hello?
Hey everybody, welcome back, and here I am observing the wildlife in my new backyard.
And I've got Julie Cook on with me.
Hi, I'm in a corner of my house, daring any of my family members to come in this room.
Nice. And of course, Matt Downing. Matt, how you doing?
Good. Excited for episode number 3, self-care. This is going to be great.
And our special guest this evening is Fran Warren. What's up, Fran?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad to have you here. I want to do a quick introduction of Fran here because you're our first guest on this podcast, and I want to try to capture Fran Warren's bio in 30 seconds or less. It's really impossible, though, for all you listeners out there. It's super impossible. So I'm going to try. Here we go. So Fran Warren founded the Educators Room 9 years ago. It's a digital platform working to amplify teacher voices across education sectors within the United States. After founding the Educators Room, Fran decided that teachers needed to be cared for as well. So she founded the Teacher Self-Care Conference, which is a convening of educators that travels around the country and focuses on teacher self-care. Appropriate, because that's our topic for this evening. Excitingly, Fran is also running for school board. What? Fran, you want to plug your school board running a little bit? What's going on with that?
So I am running for Fulton County School Board in the Metro Atlanta area, District 4. If elected, I'll be the first educator on the board. Election has been moved to June 9th. I'm running on a platform around reduced testing, more wraparound services for kids, strategic partnerships to support literacy and mathematics, and a mentoring collaborative.
Awesome. And as you can imagine, this is why Fran is on our program. So let's dive right into it. Our first topic of this evening is, we're in the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, but really teaching from a self-care perspective is just a high-stress job. I know that Julie and Janine, we could all talk about this for a long time, but I know Julie and Janine, you all have some thoughts on that. And Fran, I would love to hear your perspective as well.
So I think there are a variety of reasons why teaching is a high stress job. First of all, we have people's children, and the stakes are high. I think teaching is perhaps unique in that you're responsible for outcomes, but often in many educational settings anyway, not in my personal setting where I've been for, just about 19 years. But people they're accountable for something, but they have little say over how they can implement and make decisions. So agency, a lack of support, a top-down hierarchical structure. I think there's a variety of reasons why teachers are stressed out, and just caring for, people's children is a stressful position to be in.
Absolutely. And to piggyback on what she said also is around when you're talking about children, and I tell people this all the time, when you're responsible for the health and welfare of other people's children, it adds an element of accountability that makes teaching, not only do you have to deliver the content, but you have to make sure children they feel supported at school, they feel like they're learning. It's a lot. And when you add 30 kids who all have 30 different types of needs, it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only is there accountability, but there's also liability. You throw that in there, and that can add some stress.
Exactly. Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
But, and then I think like teachers, we can certainly go down the rabbit hole of talking about, having to teach to the tests and standards and, these evaluation systems that are based on testing results and all of that. But then I start to also think about that this is a job that it doesn't end at 3:00. I don't know any teacher that can really clock in, clock out, at least not in our school. Not only are you carrying on with, grading assignments and that kind of stuff, but you're still thinking about those kids and where you left them, and there's issues that you can't always, that are out of your control. That you end up worrying about, that there's kids that don't have enough resources or enough supplies or, access to food. And so there's so much more to it than just simply teaching. It's never just simply teaching.
Right. And I would add to that this combination of like sort of paternal feelings we all have about the kids that we're teaching, right? Whether that is, oh man, this student, I can tell really needs these sort of things and I can't really provide those things for them. It ultimately turns into like, you really deeply care about your students, and you also realize that their parents really deeply care about them too. So you have a lot of built-in like natural empathy in the job, which can be really toll taking on individuals. All day we're like, man, it's got to be really hard to learn like that. Oh man, that kid is really clearly struggling with attention or whatever it might be. And all of those feelings can lead you to a whole lot of stress and a whole lot of burden that you're feeling on your shoulders.
It can also be like a tricky relationship to have with the parents. In one set, yes, you want parents to be involved, but you also don't want them to be like the helicopter parents where they are contacting you relentlessly at all hours of the day and demanding instant feedback. And then also you have on the flip side parents that are never involved and wish that they were there to support things a little bit better. So it's like there's so much more to it.
Yeah, for sure. I want to add one more point, and I would love to hear anybody's perspective on this, is that I think teaching in the last 10 years in particular has come under a whole lot of fire. And I see it sort of starting with news pieces, maybe even about 15 years ago, where there was a lot of talk about teachers, having the whole summer off, and teachers making like these enormous salaries and having all these great benefits and not really working for their salaries. And once you get into tenure for teachers can basically just phone it in and don't really have to do the kind of work that is expected of them. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Everybody's like, yeah. And Fran, as a potential school board member in the future, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that for a lot of this narrative around teachers get the summers off, it's really one of the things that shows just how much people don't know about the teaching profession. Because I know very few educators who actually take the summer off, whether they decide to work that summer program or not. They spend a good majority of their day finding resources for the next semester, still working with kids from the school year, still at the school decorating their rooms. But I think these are all conversation starters from people who, in the first place, don't really understand what teaching is. So they go with a narrative that's the easiest way for, them maybe as a community member or as a parent or whoever to not take responsibility for, like, our teachers are working really hard. What are some policies or things that we can do to really make it so they can teach and they're not having to spend an exorbitant amount of time in order to teach. So I think that the people who push those narratives are those people who have something to gain from it. Because anybody who's been in the classroom in the last 5 to 10 years, they know just what high-stakes teaching has become.
Yeah. And I think that leads to a really great other topic that is directly related to what we're talking about here. And that is right now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a very much a veil that has been lifted off of what teachers do in classrooms, because parents are literally watching their kids at home trying to learn in this bizarro Zoom conference driven learning environment, right? And I want to get Matt's perspective, because Matt, you're supporting teachers and supporting your district through use of technology. And I would love to hear kind of what are the stresses that teachers are feeling right now that may have been different from before, and like how do you, in your view, do you think like parents are also getting a new snapshot into what teaching and learning is really like?
Yeah. I mean, this has been difficult, right? And stress is real, and it does a significant impact on our bodies. I mean, just for myself, I know I can speak that. I mean, it's difficult to sleep right now, with all of the stress on your body and looking at the screen and the whole science behind like the melatonin isn't able to, be released because of the screen time and just all of this stuff that's processing throughout the day. It is difficult to sort of relax. And I get that from other teachers. I was on a call with a teacher today, and she told me, I want to cry. I'm not used to sort of interacting with this material this way and with the students this way. I don't know if I'm doing a good job. And then sometimes I get calls from parents, and I'm really just supposed to be supporting the teachers, but I'll get a call from a parent, or a teacher will ask me to reach out, and they are at their wits' end. They're like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I can't get on this program. What's going on? And I'm like, well, what's the model of your laptop? And I'm trying to like troubleshoot.
Oh my goodness.
and sometimes I feel like I'm doing more harm, right? Because it's like, I'm like, did I just waste an hour of your life and now you're more stressed out? But yeah, it's difficult, and it's something that I think we're trying to just push aside and like just go through it. But you can't just go through the stress, because it's real and we're feeling it, and we need to stop and deal with it, or it's going to end up taking a toll. And I also don't think it's helpful enough for people to say, make sure you just walk away from the screen. It's that's not this, like, that's not going to get it done. We need to learn how to deal with this, because we've never dealt with it. And that's why, like, I'm really excited to be talking with you all tonight about self-care, because I think it's really pertinent right now. I'm feeling it, and yeah, other teachers that I'm talking to are feeling it too. This is really good.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I guess it depends on the situation, like what your school is doing and what the expectations are. I've definitely have talked to some teachers who are feeling really overwhelmed. They've been working 10, 12-hour days, just planning new content, new curriculum, because it's being transitioned to online, and how it's different from what they would have done, in the classroom. And then thinking about how to navigate all these different, Zoom, and all the controls, and being able to monitor a classroom while you're doing a live session, like just like a lot of stuff to be thinking about. And then if you have a lot of teachers who, they're not just teachers, they are parents, they are husbands, wives, whatever, significant others. They have other roles in their life to play, and that they are working from home, and there's other things going on within that home. And I think that too can also just totally impact how they're feeling and taking care of themselves as well.
I think that as all of these, we talk about all these things that are happening, and the stress that teachers are feeling, and, the thing that always gets neglected, like she said, is that teachers also should have the ability to have lives. And so many times people expect teachers to just teach 24 hours a day, answer every phone call, return every message, not realizing that these same people have families, they have second jobs, which is a whole nother topic. They have
Right.
things that they want to do. And so many times teaching, that's why a lot of teachers are opting to leave, because they don't have time to even be a parent, because teaching is so taxing on them.
Yeah, because you're at the end of the day, you're not just dealing with every kid. If you've got 32 kids in your classroom, then you have somewhere between a potential like 40 and 70 other human beings, aka parents, that you're trying to deal with, and that's a lot of people to wrangle. I would say that it's very likely that some of the biggest account executives out there don't have portfolios that are 40 to 70 people large, right? You're talking
Oh.
about a whole lot of individual beliefs and individual ideas to kind of wrangle with. And I've said this for a long time now, that everybody has a kind of thing that they have experienced in education that has been both positive and negative for them. And so then everybody has an opinion about what should be happening in classrooms. And so um, you have this like direct, I guess, line of thinking that makes people believe that they think that they know how good teaching and learning should look. And it's interesting for me to think about what's happening right now with parents and how they're able to view those things with their kids at home.
Yeah.
But I also think that it kind of behooves us as educators and education leaders to kind of work with one another to make sure that we are recognizing the stress in one another and recognizing the stress that we're experiencing and reaching out to help others as we're kind of moving forward. And Julie, I would love to hear your take on this. You had said something to me earlier about, recognizing when you need to put your own oxygen mask on first before you put the oxygen masks on of others. But, maybe teachers are more wired to put the oxygen mask on others before themselves. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think we are wired that way, and to look outward and to always be the helpers. But I think lately what's been on my mind in this environment is that the line is really blurred between, your life and your school teaching life. So at some point there has to be an end to the workday. And I think probably that extends to all people who are working out of their houses right now, that, when do you turn it off? And for teachers, I think it's always been a difficult thing to do. Right now, it just seems more difficult to do. But I think too, just remembering, I think I said this in our last episode, is, Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers. I am surrounded by, excellent colleagues who are trying to support me. So I need to, lean on them when I can. I need to focus on the positive. Remember to be grateful that we all have work. There's a lot more stress that would come from not having work. Just continuing to look for, how can I set those boundaries? How can I use my time effectively after, we really get better at this from now until the end of the year, and still have time to, have some sort of a life outside of our online teaching responsibilities right now.
Yeah. I it's so hard. Just thinking about all of what you just said, I'm like, man, that's so challenging. So one thing we haven't talked about, but I think is interesting to just hear people's perspectives on a little bit, is we are certainly maybe like closer to our families than we have been in the past. We spend more time with our families now. There's always the fun, um, fun, not so fun quote that teachers spend more time with other people's kids than they do with their own kids, right? And maybe that's not so true right now. But I wonder what you all are thinking and feeling about the lack of like physical connection, because we've had to physically distance ourselves from our students. And so the lack of like being in the actual classroom and the lack of, talking to a student face to face.
I think it does take a toll on us, but I think what this is showing us, and this is, true, even though people don't want to admit this, is that for a time there, teachers were and are still being asked to do a lot. And I can teach a child and I can teach them for 180 days and I can love them to death and I can want the best for them, but I still doesn't replace me as their parent or their caregiver. And one of the things that I've talked to teachers about is you have to have a healthy balance. I've been the teacher where I'm like their mom and it's draining. I can't even get anything done because after work, I'm advocating for children at home, just all kinds of things. And it's affected me in that I can't effectively advocate for myself or for my children, my actual children. And so while we're on this pause, everybody doesn't come from a good home life. But one of the things that I've known, I've started to even be more affirmed in is that most times somebody has somebody that cares about them. And I think teachers have to balance very strategically of them being the parent for kids at school because it's taxing. And unless you physically bring the child home with you, you many times end up at the end of the year, not just heartbroken, but just physically you can't do it. So, we're missing the kids. We want to see them, see how they're doing. But there's also that fine line in that you can't be their parent 24/7, and you have to relinquish some of that control and figure out who is that person in those kids' lives who can be you when you're not there and can really advocate for them from a parental perspective, or it might be an aunt, or it might be an older cousin or an older brother. So I know we are missing the kids and we want to see them, but also using this time to kind of pause and say, okay, here's where I can probably be a better keeper of my time, or not getting so overwhelmed with trying to help 13 kids and be their pseudo parent.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick that, my heart goes out to some of the kids, especially, we've been hearing a lot from the kids, just they miss being in school. Like they, and some of them, especially that are like home by themselves, it's just, they're like the only kid there and they don't have anybody to really hang out with or do things with. Those kids I feel really bad for.
Yeah. I mean, and to think from a little bit different of an angle, I really appreciate the points that you both are bringing up about that, but to speak from a different angle, just about social distancing in general, like it's really like jacking me up, and I think it's like messing up society. Like I went for a walk today and I got a little too close to somebody and I felt like I was doing something wrong, and I'm wondering as like a society, as a culture, like this is going to be difficult to recover from. And then thinking about it in education, like we are sort of built on these like deeper interactions and personal interactions with these kids and with other colleagues. And it's also made me like think about how we've taken a lot of those times. Like we have lots of hours with these kids, and we've taken some of that for granted. And and everyone does that in life. But like I think as educators we need to rethink, in some ways rethink like how could we do education different, like in the building, but in some ways like we have all of this time, like how can we rethink how we're going to utilize it to impact these kids, because we've had all this time before and now we haven't had any, like going from these two extremes. And I've just been thinking about that.
I just, every time somebody shouts out the name of the podcast in the middle of the podcast, I just gotta shout that out, So, all right,
I think, so much of teaching in the classroom, I think of it as, as a high art form, or at least I like to think of it that way. But so much of it is just that intuition where, you can, spot from 20 yards out that kid's body language, and he's not understanding. He's never going to ask that question, but you mosey over there and you can get him back on track or whatever it is. Or just the kids' eyes light up, like they understand. All of those things
are just missing right now in the tiny little Zoom boxes. So things definitely have had to shift. A lot of that kind of physical communication and that back and forth banter between teachers and students, it's just all very different. And I can speak for my students. We miss it, so it's a loss, I think, on the whole. Certainly there's, as we talked about before, there's opportunities, there's shifts that have to be made. We have to pivot. We're in no choice situation here, so it's going to be okay. But certainly things have shifted, that's for sure.
Yes, to all of those things. I think that there are lots of teachers out there feeling that way. But I want to harken back to what Fran was saying just a couple of minutes ago. There are also a lot of opportunities here for us to think about as teachers and as a profession how we're able to start to exercise some of the self-care that is really going to bring us through this situation. And also, and I really hope this happens, to continue to care for ourselves well after we are no longer sequestered in our back offices in our house. And I would love to talk about that for a little bit here. Maybe, Fran, you could be the one to kind of kick us off. What are some of the tools that we know that we can share with teachers now that can kind of help us get through this?
I think, one of the things that I always encourage teachers to do is to make sure that they are using this time at home to really get themselves together around mental health and just doing things that help them be calmer, be relaxed, and not get so much into the frenzy of, I have to try 20 different tools to get kids to learn. And one of the things that we talked about when the other guests talked about social distancing and, how it's messed us up, but also looking at it as a gift of, okay, now you might have a little bit more time because you're not commuting. How can you get up in the morning and, pray or, moment of silence, whatever you do, or can you take a walk, or can you call someone that you've lost in contact with? We've also been encouraging teachers to make the thing, meaning that in this digital learning, there are a lot of people pushing products down, use this, try this. And so really thinking about what do I want my kids to do and how can I get them there, and being intentional with what we do. One of the things that I was telling a friend of mine is that, I think we're going to start talking about the world pre-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, is that I was overscheduled every day from, I worked from 8 o'clock until 4:45, got home about 5:30. I was overscheduled, just activities and going and never having time to really sit and really process what I had just done and what I needed to do and how I could be better. And so that left a lot of things half done. And so during this time, the first week I was in shock. The next week I was like, I want to go back to work. But now I'm using this as a time for me to say, okay, I really need to finish this. Let me get this done. Okay, I really need to sit down and think about how I'm going to plan to do this. So for teachers to really be intentional, journal what you're doing, and reach out to people. It might be where you sit down and you realize that you don't like where you work, or you're saying, I think it's time for me to go. Okay, now you have time to really sit down and redo your resume and think about what you're going to do next. Or it might be as simple as saying, I'm sponsoring 4 sports this year, 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring. I can't do that anymore. I'm going to take it down to 1 each. But just really being intentional with what we do. And I think that if you're intentional with it, then you can avoid some of the traps of overscheduling and not really giving things your all. And I think for a lot of us, we're trained to go, go, go. But in reality, everybody takes a break. Everybody needs to rest, and not rest and you're still on your computer or you're still working on a project, but really rest and get your mind together.
Yeah, I have been thinking a lot about what are the projects that you're taking up in your life that are really, to quote the famous philosopher Marie Kondo, what are the things that you're doing in your life that are really going to give you joy. And if you're picking those things up and saying, I feel fulfilled, I feel happy after doing these things, even if it's taking up some of my time. And that can be just running around out in the yard with your kids, or watching The Bachelor, or Survivor, or whatever. For me, for example, I've taken up all these random little projects around our apartment that I have been thinking about forever. So I constructed 3 brand new picture frames. I today created like this little step thing for our dog. I am working on this like little keepsake box thing. All of these things that are getting me away from my computer and are
Yeah.
getting me engaged with something that is like tangible and real. And
Yeah.
whether that's doing a little bit of meditation in the morning, like you were suggesting, Fran, or at night, or whenever during the day, but making sure you're taking a little bit of time just to focus yourself, your mind, your energy, whatever that might be for you. I think it's really critical. And I think it's really critical that we all think about, every teacher, every person thinks about, what are those things that are really going to allow you to kind of center yourself, bring yourself back to not feeling like you're running ragged all the time, you know?
After I got over the initial shock, one of the first things that I've done is, and I've told my husband this, I've had to get things in my own house in order. So whether it's cleaning out closets, whether it's cleaning out my office, whether it's getting the junk out so that I have clarity so that I can tackle new things. Before COVID, I was just starting things and haphazardly, and I don't have enough time in the day, and what am I going to do? Now I'm sitting here and I'm saying, okay, these things are in order in my house. Now I can go and do these other things.
Yeah, I love it. Janine, Julian, Matt, what are you all thinking?
Oh, Fran, just to say, to get things in order. So we had this, me and my wife got married 15 years ago, and we're finally finishing our wedding scrapbook. So we're finally getting that in order.
What?
This box of stuff has been, and we've moved like 6 times. So we move it like since we've been married, and we just keep moving. Like, oh yeah, we'll get to that. And finally, we like took it out. Like, we are doing this, and so yeah, we're trying to get that in order. And it actually does feel good. I can relate with what you're saying. Like, and we have other little projects that we're done, but it's like, yeah, we got to get that done so we can move on and start other stuff, and another scrapbook.
So 15 years from now, you're
But I want you to think about that for a second, in the sense of, we have become so busy that we continually go through, and we're so busy that we don't have time to enjoy life.
Yeah.
We make it about being busy opposed to really enjoying it. And so when I'm thinking about, I just moved into a new house last January, a year ago. And so I haven't really enjoyed my house because I've been going to work. Well, what's the point of getting a new house if you don't enjoy it? If you're too busy because you're working all the time, like what does that really say? And so, I laugh about that because I still have a scrapbook from when I got married that I haven't finished. But, it's one of those things where you really have to examine, why am I busy? Is it really adding value to my life? Or am I busy to say I'm busy because I feel indebted for certain things? So post-COVID-19, I will use my time wiser, and I will not commit to things that I know I can't do well and that don't serve me purpose or joy.
Well, I would just say that I'm mostly listening because that's exactly the message I need to hear right now. I am right now, I think, stretched pretty thin. I do think it will get it easier, but this has not been an easy process, whipping up cyber school in the past month. So I think we've got a plan in place. I definitely think every day gets a little easier. But right now, I'd be looking for moments instead of larger blocks of time for my me projects. But it's definitely something that I'm listening very carefully to what Fran is saying.
And I'm saying this out of experience because, I just it really has grounded me and say, I really do too much. And the kids say it all the time. You do too much, Miss Warren, but really, when you do too much and you can't even enjoy life.
Yeah, I totally connected with the comment about like trying to have things organized just in your own home and stuff like that. And yeah, I just moved. I moved the week that our school closed. We moved, and and our construction on our house was brought to a halt. I'm sleeping in my dining room, and my clothes are in the garage somewhere. I don't even know. It's like scavenger hunt every day to find what I'm going to wear. But yeah, so I feel that. I know exactly what you're saying. Today, and I was like, what can I control? Like, what can I do to just kind of have that feeling of, all right, something is in order. So I just like clean the kitchen and dining room. It was like 10 minutes. Just like, let me at least clean this. And then at least that is something I can sit in there and have some peace for a minute. Yeah.
So we're kind of transitioning into our last segment. And in our last episode, we started up this new last segment called "What is this situation causing us to rethink about education?" And I would love to hear from everybody. What for you is, and we want to try to relate this to our topic for this episode, right? So, what is COVID-19 situation making us rethink about teacher self-care?
It's making me rethink that less is more. Really, less is more. I can't talk teacher self-care if I'm overscheduled. If I don't even have time to with doing simple things, like I can't talk teacher self-care. So my calendar will be drastically reduced. I just can't. I can't do it.
Drop the mic. The episode's over. That's it. I think this is making me rethink, in terms of teacher self-care, how we can really try to support more teachers to realize that teacher self-care is important, right? And especially now that we're at home, because it's easier to support other people when you see them every day. So every day I walk by, my colleague Amanda's office, and I'm like, "Hey, Amanda, how are you? How are things going today? How are you feeling?" That's easy for me to do. And just that check-in makes sure that, she and I are on sort of the level and we're going into our day with positivity. But what this is making me rethink is, how can we help other people develop habits that don't, require us to see each other every day and check in about those things. So when I text Amanda now, I'm like, "Hey, just checking in on you. How are you doing?" That's awesome, and I'm going to continue to do that. But I also want her to ask herself the question, "How am I doing today? How am I coping with my situation? How am I feeling like I am fulfilled and happy today for me?" Right? And those questions, I think, are something that, especially for early service teachers, we're talking in this group about people that have been in the teaching job for 10 years, maybe more. And I want to talk to like second year teachers. You're drowning and crying every night because teaching is a rough job for at least 5 years. And how are you asking yourself the question and answering it? What am I doing for me today? How am I feeling okay today?
Like rethinking organizationally how we how we do interact with each other. Like Mike, I think you bring up a great point there, like that personal connection, being able to just check in with people. I think oftentimes like we're in go mode, like just it's work. I got to do this. I have this meeting and then another meeting, and then I'm working with the kids, and and so on. And we never make that time for relationship building with the rest of our faculty and our staff, and that kind of stuff that really ends up carrying us forward as a whole organization. So I think just rethinking ways in which we can support each other in developing relationships.
Well, I think for me, I will be honest again, like I think before COVID-19, I was that teacher who kind of, way led way, every hour turned into another hour. And, it was really kind of fuzzy when I stopped working or when I wasn't working. And it was, pretty hard for me to turn my brain off, even if I were having dinner with the family or whatever. Just thinking about, what's next? What do I need to do? And now I think without that drive home, which for me is only like 12 minutes, but even that is like that physical, like I'm driving home, and for a bit there was a bridge, I could say that I'm not working right now. So I've been having to think about boundaries and separation between work and home, because there's no physical separation, that's for sure. So that's going to be, I think, a new thought for me, and I'll have to see where that leads.
Yeah, for me, I was really impacted with the idea that sort of Fran has brought up, with the idea of less is more. And I just think that is something that, not needs to not only resonate with me, but I need to like do it, and when all of these things come on the plate, I need to look at them and think, what is necessary, what builds into what I want to do, what builds into my job, and the things that don't, like, why am I wanting to do those? Getting at motivations, am I wanting to control other people's space? Like, I need to stay in my lane and stay with less is more, and do what I'm able to do. And I feel like that will free me up more, but it's easier said than done, right? I mean, it's hard to put things down and to engage in other things, but it's really necessary, like we're talking about, for our self-care. And I just know this conversation has been really helpful for me, because this is something that I don't think I do well at, but it's very necessary, and it's a conversation we need to have, because I think it's one that isn't talked about and one that isn't ignored. So I do appreciate the work that is done for teacher self-care, because yeah, it's not built in enough for teachers.
So before we head on out at the end of this episode, we have to plug a book, of course, right, Fran? This year, 2020, actually right at the beginning of this sort of pandemic, the Educators Room released its second or third book in the series, Fran?
It's our second book in the series.
Second book in the series. So this one is called When the Fire is Gone: Real Stories of Survival, Resilience, and Heartbreak When Dealing with Teacher Burnout. I have to say, both Fran and I authored chapters in the book, and you can head over to Amazon. If you just look up When the Fire is Gone, it usually comes up within the first few results, and it's a terrific read. It's a short read, right? A little less than 100 pages, but it really, really brings in these stories of teachers grappling with how to not burn out of the job that they love. Fran, you want to add anything about the book?
And that it's not one of these books where everything ends up and everything's good. Sometimes I read books around mental health, and things are always rosy at the end, but in reality, we're humans and things happen, and you may opt to say, I think I'm going to leave for a minute, or this isn't the place for me. So it's a really short, great read, and it's so needed. And it's something that teachers can read and say, okay, I'm going to do this next.
And just while you're here, Fran, you want to mention anything about the Educators Room? Of course, if you're a teacher out there and you haven't checked out the Educators Room, you should do it. It's awesome. Go ahead, Fran.
So we have thousands of articles, all written by teachers for teachers. And my premise on starting the website was around there's not a lot of teacher voice writing about what happens in education. And many times we get the perspective from people who either have never stepped foot in a classroom, or so long ago that they don't really understand how school works now. And so we have thousands of articles, writers from all over the world, and it's a great space. So log in, www.theeducatorsroom.com, and that's our handle on all social media.
Well, hey, Fran, thank you so much for joining us this evening. My fellow co-hosts, Janine, Julie, and Matt, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Come back at us. This is our third episode, and this ends our first series, which is all about COVID-19 and coping with COVID-19. Our next episode, episode 4, we're going to start our new series about networks. And we're going to start to kind of explore some networks that exist out there that are really trying to do education differently, and that are really trying to, quote unquote, rethink education, as we like to say. We'll bring on hopefully another guest, and we'll talk about some of these networks that we think are doing really great work in the world. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate your time, and keep listening, please, and rate us on iTunes. We would love to hear your reviews, and we would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much.